How to Hire Employees, our 2021 guide. Hello, I'm Ken Robinson and welcome to the program. If you're like me, you've probably had problems in the past trying to find that elusive employee that meets all your criteria. Not only do they meet your criteria, but they turn out to be a great choice. I remember years ago, my wife and I hired someone who on paper looked absolutely perfect. You couldn't get better. It turned out to be a disaster. I remember in several instances, we hired recruitment companies to do the job for us. They got us people that we wish we'd never met. So on today's program, to take the drama, the strain, the stress out of hiring somebody, my guest today is Graeme Rogers, and he is an expert in helping small business people go through the process of hiring someone successfully who lasts the distance and meets exactly what you're looking for. Hello, Graeme, and welcome to the program. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Ken.
So, Graeme, take us back to the beginning, because I was reading your CV. At one stage, you were a vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank in New York. Doesn't get much bigger than that. You had a very successful recruiting company based in the heart of Sydney CBD for many years called Boydens. But now you specialise, and unlike many other recruitment companies, they actually get to deal with you instead of a junior. Take us back to the start of your career. Where did it start, and give us a bit of a summary?
A quick thumbnail. Well, my initial career was as an accountant in industry. So I worked in quite a lot of industries, including heavy engineering, construction, food, retail. And then second career moved into financial services in stockbroking and investment banking. And then a turning point was I decided to go back and do a graduate program at London School of Economics in finance and strategic marketing, really. Although it was that was a specialisation of that particular school. And from there, I was recruited by Chase Manhattan Bank to set up their global investment bank, or the finance function of that, in London. That led to appointments in New York and then back to Australia. Few more years in banking, and then I moved to consulting, and that exposed me to executive search, and that's where I've been for almost 30 years, initially as a principal and managing director of Boyd in Sydney, and then after the global financial crisis, we all set up our own individual boutique practices, which I've now been running for, 2009, 12 years. And that's what I'm doing now. So it's very personalised. I call it a boutique search practice because you get me rather than a junior member of staff who has no, as you said, no life or career experience.
And that's the reason why I got you on the show. I mean, this show is about sales and marketing. Well, one of the key things in sales is that there are lots of people who'd like to get into sales because you can make an incredible income and lifestyle out of it. But in most cases, most people don't know how to sell. They just have no idea. And that's why it's important that you have people who have a background like you do in business. Give us a rundown, as an employer, and I mean, this is going to be helpful just as much to me as anybody watching this program, because you know what it's like. I mean, I've been an employer. If you're watching this and you're about to employ somebody, it is not a very nice experience because it is so easy to get it wrong. Give us some steps on what we should do to successfully start the process of hiring somebody.
Classic deception, isn't it? Lots of things we think we can do around the house until we say, I think it's better I had a professional. Exactly the same for recruitment, because many business people think, what do recruiters do? I could do that. They just do an ad, put an ad in the paper, and then handle the responses. Correct? But knowing how to do that successfully and get the outcome, you're much better off to work with a professional who's made that their career. And I discovered, to my great surprise, that I had a third career where it would enable me to focus on my greatest interest, which is people. But all of the experience I'd had as a finance guy who then became a marketer Chase taught me marketing and selling, and then I had to run my own business where I had to really sell or I wouldn't have a business. All of those skills get to be applied in helping clients. But to directly answer the question, what are the steps? the two most critical steps are sitting down and determining what are the key outcomes, that measurable business outcomes is the way I'd put it in consultant speak. What do you want to get out of this appointment in business terms? And that leads you to then sit down and say, now, what are the specific things that I want this person who I'm going to appoint to do for my company? And I call those the primary business deliverables. Those two things help me figure out what sort of person you're going to look for, and then I can guide you, or someone with my skills or background can guide you on where and how to look for those people.
Now, on a show like this, I like to have guests who've had real life experience. I mean, what you've shared is great in theory. Give us an example of how it's played out in your career where you've actually been able to help somebody.
I think one I shared with you was the very large Australian building roofing company called Stramit. And they had an issue because they're about a $350 million company when they asked me to look for a CEO. And their challenge was, in a very diversified distribution business, how can we improve our margins? And we sat down and we worked through the likely things that would need to be addressed, and therefore the likely background. And intriguingly, I said to them, you think you need someone from the steel industry. I think you don't. I think you need someone who understands market segmentation, distribution. And as a result of that discussion, I went out and found a guy who would literally turn that company around. In 4 years. He doubled their revenues from 350 to 700 million plus, and he trebled their margins by completely moving the business from a highly competitive, basically a commodities marketplace, into a specialized business outcomes. Now, no 20-year-old consultant is going to be able, 25 or even 30-year-old consultant is going to understand even the first principles of what I've just said, much less how to go find one.
Now, and that leads us to a point. I mean, you look in the yellow pages, you look online, there are hundreds of recruitment companies. I mean, some of them, they've got beautifully impressive offices. They've got signs everywhere. But if you were going to hire a recruitment company yourself, what would you advise people to look for?
Well, the truism is that all recruitment consultants are not the same. And most of the big ones are focused on process and revenues. So they're not focused on your outcome, although that should be their primary focus. As a result of that, they hire young people and teach them how to run process. So young people are told, I need a particular skill set. Here's the professional background. This is the industry they should have worked in. That's all they will look for. They won't for a moment consider somebody who's from a lateral industry where the skill set may have great application to this role and could add significant value. I call it cross-industry skills transfer because it's very much the focus of what I do, and it's my differentiator in the marketplace. So I'm really good at spotting somebody who initially looks wrong but could be right. And I've got some great examples of that. One classic example was a job I did for an organisation which is a medical college. It's called the Australian Orthopaedic Association. And that's the professional body for 3,500 Australian orthopaedic surgeons. Now, dealing with these organisations is fascinating because they're classically membership organisations who are also tertiary teaching institutions because they take doctors and make them into orthopaedic surgeons. 6 years of study and a lot of work. But they've always been membership rather than commercially focused. So I went off and found these guys, a man who had run businesses. Intriguingly, he came out of financial services, but he was a very, very skilled business manager and a great people manager. And he's taken that organisation over the last, it's close to 10 years now, to a world-class, top-level educational institution, which is commercially focused and is the leader of Australian ethical performance in that sector. So if you find the right person, fantastic results can follow.
Now, take us through the process. So let's just say, for example, somebody watching this program decides to reach out to you and because they're actually going to get the opportunity to work with you and you alone, right? It's like me. I mean, I get hired to do sales training, copywriting and marketing. And one of the first things my clients say to me when they sign the contract, am I working with you? Because, you don't want, in this day and age, it's
Yep.
taken me 30 years to be able to actually run, well, even put this program together, that people actually agree to come on to this program simply because, they respect what I do and they want to be associated with me. No 20-year-old has that respect because they haven't been around the block, or as I
Yeah.
like to say, I started last week. It's just been a hell of a long
Yep.
week. So what is the difference between the process a lot of recruitment companies go through that you do that makes that difference?
I suspect that it comes from, my first career was in a discipline called accounting and financial management. And those disciplines often serve you well later in your career, because I run a very fastidious and very detail oriented assignment where I'll sit down with the client and I'll talk to them about their business at some length before we talk about a candidate, because I want to know how they're running their business. What likely change could this person make? And that helps us map what sort of skills and experience. And particularly, I always say skills and experience are 1/3. Their character and their values and their personal contribution is 2/3 of the equation. Because if you get that right, that's when you start to get fit and get really good outcomes. And my great joy is to have appointments that last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And that's unusual for CEOs these days. They're typically 2, 3, 4-year appointments. But if they're still there after 10 years, something's going really well, especially if they're hitting it out of the park on performance, like these guys do.
Now, after the break, Graeme is going to come back and he's taken the trouble of preparing 3 simple steps that if you're thinking of employing somebody, you can apply, whether it's this year or in 2021. But can I just ask you a favour? The way these programs get put out to the marketplace through YouTube or LinkedIn is certainly by people doing things like hitting the subscribe button. If you're watching this on YouTube, up above you is the subscribe button. Now, why is that important? Well, it tells YouTube that what I'm putting together is of use to people. So if you're finding this of value, I would like you to help me, because I'd like to help other people like you. And the best way of doing that, it costs nothing. There's no financial commitment. You simply hit the subscribe button and it enables me to get this message to many other people who, like you, may be going through the process of employing somebody. So Graeme, as I said, just in that little piece there, one of the things I like to do in this program is always to finish off with some simple, clear steps. Because, looking at your career, you've worked at Chase Manhattan Bank as a vice president. You don't get much bigger than that. You've worked for small businesses. My understanding is you even did one particular project for the House with No Steps, which is a disability unit. So you've worked with the big and small. And I would imagine that there are a lot of people out here who have built their business to a certain stage where, it's probably mum and dad, they've got a couple of employees, and maybe they're taking on their first manager. Or maybe they've grown a little bit further and they're now taking on a general manager. And a lot's riding on this. You can't afford to get this wrong. Can you give us some key steps, whether we're employing a receptionist or a general manager, that we should apply when employing somebody?
Well, you touched on House with No Steps. It's a well-known Australian disability charity. And these organisations have a certain commonality in their characteristics, and they're often started by people who have a passion for the cause. And so it was with House with No Steps. But they've got a very large commercial organisation underpinning that, not just sheltered workshops, but seriously commercial businesses where they employ people with disability. So sitting down and talking to them about what they were trying to achieve, it quickly became a very strong commercial focus. So we were looking for someone who was going to have the tremendous empathy to work with the people who'd set this organisation up and run it with passion, but somebody who was able to guide it in its commercial development. And that role led to that appointment. We identified a guy who'd come out of the information technology industry, but just happened to have in his family a disabled person. So he had a very strong empathy with what they were doing, but he brought tremendous commercial skills And he's been running that place for, well, it's well over a decade now. And it's now merged. It's a really high-profile organisation because he brought that extra element. To get to your comment about what are the quick clues, my clues are, I touched on them earlier. Before you start writing a position description for the role, think about what the business outcomes are for this role before that. Just try and sit down and jot them down and articulate them as best you can before you talk to someone like me, because that information lets me know what kind of person you're likely to be looking for. Then you define what are the business deliverables you want this appointee to do. What's the difference you want them to make to your business? And then that gives me enough information to guide you on how we'll go and find them, because there are a number of techniques that you can use. The obvious ones are executive search, which is research-driven and network-driven, and advertised recruitment, which is your job board or ads on a job site. And typically, these days, we'll use both because research will take us so far down particular defined pools of candidates with skills and certain experience. The advertised job board will reach out into areas of the market that we can't possibly reach because there are people out there who we can't see who just might have skill sets like the guy I referred to at the Orthopaedic Association. An ex-banker, he wouldn't show up normally in a search, but his skill sets were absolutely not just appropriate, but we're able to leap them forward in ways they hadn't even imagined they could do as a medical training institution. So that gives you a clue. And the third one, if there is a third one, is approach a professional. Someone like me, you're always free to give me a call. Ken's going to put my details up. Happy to talk to you about the way in which you're going about the process. And that, of course, is obligation free.
That leads us to a good question, because you see companies, they've got great advertising, great looking office and all of that type of stuff. And, there's a saying, people's perception is their reality. But in many cases, you can sign up to a company like this, and I'm not just talking about recruitment, it could be, there's many industries where this happens, where you actually end up meeting Mr. Dodgy Brothers. Can you just give us some tips of what to look out for that should be ringing the alarm bells as make us thinking, mate, this guy's going to rip us off? I mean, what are some of the things that you've noticed in your industry that point out to a person who is nothing much more than Mr. Dodgy Brothers?
I think you touched on it earlier, Ken, when you said, people call and ask, are you going to be working for them, or are you going to give the assignment to someone else? That's the first question you're entitled to ask as an employer, regardless of the size of your business. So if you talk to a recruiter, so it might be me, but it might be someone I recommend to you. If it's someone I recommend, you can trust them. But if you're not sure and you can't find anyone in your circle to advise you, then you ask them to come and meet you, because you want to assess them. If they're any good, they'll want to assess you face to face. And you simply say to them, if I work with you, you're telling me a good story, will I be getting you all the way through this assignment, or are you going to hand it to someone who's going to do most of the work and you're simply going to bless the process? Remember, you can ask that question, and you should ask that question. Same as if you're hiring a plumber. You hire a reputable plumber, and on the day, the apprentice turns up without the plumber. Now, are you happy about that? I'm not. I recruited the guy who had the reputation, not the acolyte. Now, the acolyte might turn out to be very good, but I'd rather have the guy I hired. That makes sense, Ken?
Very much so. Graeme Rogers, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, there we have it, our very simple step-by-step guide on hiring an employee. And as I said in the middle of the program, if you could do me that quick favour before the video ends, simply hit the subscribe button, and it helps YouTube get these videos out to people, and we all need help. And, I love that old saying by Zig Ziglar, the famous sales trainer. He said, if you help enough people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. And that's why I'm going to the trouble of making these programs. I'm not making any money out of it. I'm simply trying to help my clients and people out there, because if we all stick together, 2021, I think is going to be quite exciting as we all grow our businesses. I'm Ken Robinson. Until our next video, take care. Bye for now. If you found this program helpful, I have a feeling you will love these two videos. To make sure you don't miss out on other programs, please click the subscribe button below. Until next time, I'm Ken Robinson. Bye for now.